Kakva je perspektiva Ukrajine u pokušaju da se obrani od ruske agresije? Što mogu očekivati zemlje Europske unije u novim okolnostima između Trumpa i Putina? Je li Europska unija spremna i koliko je prijeti opasnost iznutra od populista? Sve su to pitanja koja danas u Idejama HR u Strasbourgu postavljamo Michaelu Gahleru, izvjestitelju Europskog parlamenta o Ukrajini.
It's increasingly more evident that, especially in the area of defense, we need Ukraine more and more because they are innovative, they know how to fight. It was not smart, by no means. It was a political mistake from the president of Ukraine to agree to nominate this army unit after this, Ukrainian insurgent army or whatever you translate it with, this UPA. I'm pretty sure that there is no majority of French citizens who would like to have a convicted person becoming president. Both BSW and AfD are close emotional, political, mental allies of Vladimir Putin. 6% of all German doctors, in my case, have a Syrian origin. I think it's not in our interest to send them home, although they are needed at home.
Europski parlament vrlo jasno je još jednom poručio što smatra da je potrebno napraviti u Ukrajini. Ovo su Ideje HR. Ja sam Domagoj Novokmet. Naš gost je danas član CDU-a iz Njemačke i zastupnik Europskog parlamenta Michael Gahler. Razgovaramo o njegovom izvještaju koji je usvojen o Ukrajini u Europskom parlamentu na posljednjem zasjedanju prije ljetne stranke. Mr. Gahler, welcome to Ideje. For the beginning, what do you think is the key message from your report about Ukraine, and are you satisfied with the reaction of the parliament?
Well, first of all, we have over the years always had a rock-solid 5 political groups Ukraine coalition, and that has stood again. We had 70% of the votes cast, in spite of the hiccups, the unfortunate ones that we had between Poland and Ukraine currently over some historic issues. But on the substance, we reaffirm our steadfast commitment to support the country in all its rights against the Russian aggression. There is no wavering, there is unwavering support. And concerning both the political commitment, the financial commitment, the military commitments, as far as we can do it from the EU side. And insofar, I'm glad that we stand together. And it's increasingly more evident that, especially in the area of defense, we need Ukraine more and more because they are innovative, they know how to fight, they know how to stand against the aggressor, so we can learn from them and we need them for our future defense posture.
You mentioned these historical issues between Poland and Ukraine. How dangerous it is, how smart it was from both sides to escalate it?
It was not smart, by no means. It was a political mistake from the president of Ukraine to agree to nominate this army unit after this Ukrainian insurgent army or whatever you translate it with, this UPA. Yes, from a Ukrainian perspective, they fought against Stalin, they were for Ukraine's statehood, but you cannot separate the activities in this regard from, objectively happening massacres against the civilian population. That is unacceptable, and that is why it was clear that this had to be criticized. But we at the same time, we call for reconciliation, we call for dialogue in this regard, and it happened already. The foreign minister Sybiha was in Warsaw, met his counterpart Radek Sikorski, and they are pledging to address the issue. It had been addressed already. There have been active talks, and so it's even more unfortunate that it was brought to such a situation. But we are confident that reason will prevail. Nobody can have an interest that Putin is happy about this conflict between Ukraine and Poland.
Mentioning Putin, one of his hopes obviously was that NATO will collapse or that Europe will be left alone by United States. How would you define United States and Europe relations inside NATO, inside the coalition for support of Ukraine?
Well, we are clearly assuming more responsibility. There is more division of labor. On the one hand, and that is clear, and that was the first paragraph of the Ankara Summit Declaration, that there is an ironclad commitment to our collective defense under Article 5. That was important, that remains important, that is the key. And still, it is also obvious that we Europeans, well, we should have assumed more responsibility already earlier. Previous administrations have called on that already, and Trump has expressed it in a more, shall I say, verbally brutal way. We are reacting. We are stepping up our defense efforts on the national level, where there is, of course, the bulk of the budgets, but also with the European measures, with the 800 billion pledge from the Commission, where 650 billion is the amount of money that member states can use without fearing a deficit procedure from the Euro Stability Pact. And then we have the SAFE program, 150 billion, where those member states who would have to pay higher interest rates on the capital market are getting cheaper rates, making use of that. So these are some of the measures, apart from other, we had programs already running, EDIRPA, ASAP, so these were for upgrading ammunition production, giving money for more cooperation. All these things are already happening and will happen in the new financial framework, and Ukraine will be fully included.
Do you agree with me that Trump doesn't like EU? As a concept?
Yes, he doesn't like. He would prefer to engage with individual member states. He has tried it before. He doesn't succeed because we are a single market. We are a customs union towards the outside. So you cannot single out whatever state and either make arrangements or punish them individually. That's a non-starter. He doesn't like the EU as a concept, indeed. And sometimes he claims that we were founded to harm the United States. I mean, we should remain sober and look at what they are doing, not what he is saying, because he might even have forgotten what he said in an hour later.
In one way, maybe he did a favor to European Union. Do you agree with me that some things are finally moving after decades of just discussing, delaying?
Well, I mean, the EU has grown over crisis or pressure or threats or challenges from outside. I mean, the founding fathers and some others, they, of course, were under the impression of the Second World War, saying never again, let's find new ways of interacting, and we have found it. And I think the European Union is the most successful story of former belligerent states, how they come together, and we can, amongst ourselves, 100% say there will be no war. We will have arguments, we will have conflicts, but we will settle it in a civilized way, and at the end we are voting, either in the European Parliament or we are going to the Court of Justice. That is the civilizatory quantitative advantage that we have created. And so far, we are attractive, we remain to be attractive, and if challenges come additionally, then we address them. The single market had to be founded decades ago because there were other competitors on the market. Single currency for most of us. We are now finding new partners with free trade agreements. That is our way to broaden the scope of rules-based order. And if even friends are getting a bit, unfriendly, then we address it as well. And we have concluded a deal on the trade issues. And that, by the way, when some people ask, why is it that the Americans are paying no tariffs for their imports and we are paying 15% or even more, it has to be seen in a holistic thing. At the same time, we needed to have US further committed to NATO. That was already this Scotland deal with von der Leyen on his golf course in Scotland. That was already a year ago. And that was also ahead of a NATO summit. And it was about not throwing Ukraine totally in front of the bus, as the Americans say. And in this holistic thing, then we can have to assess, okay, we could accept this deal. We had other measures. We could have also taken out all our, shall I say, customs torture instruments. We have not done it. I think it was wise to not to over-challenge them. And now what is important for our industry, for our entrepreneurs, is security, in the sense that we know what is the framework in which we are acting.
Talking about perspective and pressure, what about China?
Well, China...
In this situation, with European Union pressured between Putin and Trump, in a way.
Yes. I mean, I would, of course, prefer if the American president, who clearly sees China as the major, competitor, challenger or threat, that he would rather seek common ground with us. Because we are also challenged by China in a similar way, with all their cheap products, with their unfair ways of producing things, also with their capability to, potentially act in a negative way through cyberspace and all these things. What the Russians are actively doing now, they have got this potential as well. So there is a lot of common ground. And in my ideal vision, I would like to see, we're not going to have it, but a TTIP 2.0, what we tried. If the United States, Europe, and all the other partners with whom we have already free trade agreements, if we had free trade, rock-solid free trade agreement amongst ourselves, then we would really dominate the global market and the standards that are attached to it. And then the Chinese would have to, so to say, to accept our standards and not try, as they do, to go one after the other against us and thereby perhaps gain some ground. So my clear preference is, we are not going to see it with this administration, that we work together as much as possible with regard to China, but ideally also in a common framework of trade agreements. Talking
about inner pressures, are you satisfied with the development in Hungary after Petera Magyara and Tisza election victory?
Yes, of course. I mean, we have seen that ever since the blockades against Ukraine have largely stopped. They have not blocked anything in this regard. He has clearly committed domestically, and that is also important for us because we want member states that abide by the rule of law. He has committed to an agenda to, also with his two-thirds majority, to wisely reorient and adjust the legal framework to a normally functioning state, and to address all the corruption, the systemic corruption that had developed, and thereby also set the record straight again. I mean, there is a dire need to assess all what happened with the abuse also of EU funds when there were public procurement, where that were only mock ones, where there perhaps was only one bidder, or other ways and means to abuse EU money and then in a way privatize it for his buddies. I think there is this clear commitment to transparency in the process, and we are supporting him, but also watching, of course.
One of my guests told me, okay, now we have better situation with Hungary, but there are another development which should maybe worry pro-European and pro-democracy actors, for example, France with Marine Le Pen going to elections, but also with AfD in Germany.
Well, I mean, in our democracies and in the challenging times that we live in, yes, we see that the populists are gaining ground, especially when the mainstream parties are not delivering. And that is a challenge to all of us. And we all of us have regular elections. And especially next year, we have France, we have Spain, we have Poland, we have other countries, Italy probably, so also major countries. And this question is always of relevance. Well, I'm not a prophet. I don't know who will be the counter-candidate against Madame Le Pen. But frankly speaking, I think it's better for the democratic spectrum to have Madame Le Pen than perhaps the more smarter Monsieur Bardella, who sits here in our parliament, who does not speak as radically, but who has the same party to represent. And I definitely prefer a mainstream candidate winning than her. But I think the chances having her are better, because I think she remains convicted. She has and I'm pretty sure that there is no majority of French citizens who would like to have a convicted person becoming president, especially also with her verbal radicalism that prevails. I think the French are mature enough at the end to choose any reasonable candidate.
In talking about Germany, are you afraid of this autumn and elections on the state levels?
Yes, definitely. We see the forecasts now for Sachsen-Anhalt is the first one, 42%, plus 7% is BSW from Mrs. Wagenknecht. Together they are so close that there is this theory that what is Hufeisen, this
unfinished circle.
This unfinished circle theory where the extremes are very close to each other. And that with regard to Russia, that is definitely the case. I mean, both BSW and AfD are close emotional, political, mental allies of Vladimir Putin. And that is a real challenge, and we need to address it. I mean, there are already discussions now. Can we keep Sachsen-Anhalt government in the interlander information exchange when it's about sensitive issues? I mean, if those who mentally and politically lean towards a war criminal like Putin, if they get hold of sensitive information, probably they will behave like Szijjártó or the former Hungarian foreign minister, so to say, in real time inform the Russians. That is what we cannot risk. These are things to be addressed, but what is more important is, of course, to address the reasons why people are voting for these extremists. And again, it is because the mainstream is not delivering. But I mean, the mainstream, what can we do? I mean, we couldn't do anything. We didn't foresee COVID. But the consequences thereof, economically, health-wise, mentally, are drastic. This awful full-scale war that was not planned, that had to be, all these major challenges from outside have to be factored in. And then, to an extent, it's also the task, of course, of us, the mainstream parties, to explain why it is so difficult and why no easy solutions from whomever it comes will address complex problems. I mean, we are addressing, and the figures are real, the migration, the irregular migration issue. The figures are substantially down, and still, in German case, AfD is going up. So it's apparently not only about migration figures that need to be addressed. It's right to address these issues.
Do you think that maybe one of the reasons is that we don't live anymore in the world of arguments? We live in the world of social media, social networks, and in the world where people choose what they will consider the truth?
I really think that this fact is one of the major reasons for that. As you rightly say, that people choose, that they hear what they want to hear, that they are in their silos, in their opinion silos. And I mean, that is true for both for extremist opinions, but also for other issues when it's about increasing knowledge of child abuse, all these things that go through the social media. Earlier, when you either had weird opinions, it was difficult. You needed quite some time to find another one who shares your weird opinions. Now it's 3 clicks in the internet, and then you find your like-minded ones, and you at the same time think, oh, we are so many. And that is really a challenge. And I have to admit, I do not yet know the solution for the mainstream opinion makers, for us as the parties who work on a reasonable basis, who address the challenges, who weigh the arguments, who see how differentiated we must find compromises. Our daily business here in the European Parliament is compromise. For us, it's not a bad connotation to have a compromise solution. But for many people who have their firm opinions and say 100% it's my opinion that must be implemented, well, in this regard, I cannot deliver, and especially not simple solutions for complex problems. Should we address now if somebody says all Syrians out because now the civil war is over? 6% of all German doctors, in my case, have a Syrian origin, I think it's not in our interest to send them home, although they are needed at home. Yeah, just one example. Many are not only doctors, but living, working in the health sector, in the care sector, where we are desperately short of people. So I think we need to make it very clear that all such simple principles that we don't, as we say in German, shoot into our own foot, but that we apply adequate solutions that serve our interests as well.
Mr. Gahler, thank you very much for your time. Hvala i vama, dragi gledatelji, hvala i vama, dragi slušatelji. Ne zaboravite se pretplatiti na naše kanale, besplatno je, tako ćete nas najjednostavnije pronaći. Bile su ovo Ideje HR iz Strasbourga.